Hi, Jeej. You can unmute yourself, Jeej. It's probably good to make sure I can hear people.
Can you hear me?
I can indeed. See how I've done up my hair so nicely? Hey, Dan.
Hello.
Hi, Dan.
Hi, Kai. I found a feature where I can touch up my appearance. Do I look like I've got makeup on?
Oh, Dan, you always look great. I can't tell.
I'm so more comfortable behind the camera, Kai. I was a producer for TV commercials. That was behind the camera. Anywho, hoping to learn some tricks.
How do I get this digital makeup?
Oh, go into your settings, and then I think in video, it's like touch up my appearance. Can you see it? I can't remember. I think I don't want to play with it now. You look very professional, Kai.
Thank you. I didn't want to overdo it by going with a tie. I figured collared shirt would probably be enough.
Yeah, perfect. I'm gonna have to sit up. Okay. Did you find it, Jeej? Oh. I'm running like 5 devices at the moment. So under your profile pic, under settings, then, oh, it's in video.
Got it. I don't know if it's made any difference. My wrinkles gone?
Having so much fun playing with this tech. It's quite distracting. I like your background, Gigi.
I've gone more corporate today.
Yes.
So we had a call with CEIG yesterday and hi, Christine. And the guy had like a universe, but it was like showing up in his shirt and his eyes instead of his background. It was glitchy and it was really freaky.
And I've also seen on social media, or my children told me how you can make a recording of yourself like this and then just play that and look like you're attending a meeting, but actually not be there. I can see people joining now. Fantastic. I'll just wait another minute or two.
Sure thing.
A little bit early. Hello, everybody joining. It's nice to see some clients come in. We'll just give it another couple of seconds.
Okay, so I have the group chat open so people can text in their questions if they want to.
Okay. I can see people still joining. Let's give it half a minute and then we'll kick off, I think.
I think a lot of our clients are bashful about appearing on video, other than Lynn. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing.
Wait till they're all trained up and they'll turn their cameras on. You watch.
They'll be eager. Although maybe I'll scare them from appearing on camera. They'll be too busy checking their backgrounds to make sure there's nothing incriminating.
All right, I think we will make a start. Thank you and welcome to everybody. So essentially, we did set this up as just a blue chip lunch and learn. We were going to be just training out the blue chippers, but the COVID world has driven a lot of us to working from home and talking to clients and whatnot. We figured it might be helpful to open this up to a broader audience. So for those of you who haven't met me, I'm Danielle Stitt. I'm the Chief Executive of Blue Chip. We're not Zoom experts, so if we're just sort of coming to grips with using this platform, so please bear with us if there's any technical issues. We didn't plan for you to be here beyond Blue Chippers, but we're really glad you did come. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. Everybody's great. Everybody's coming in with their mics muted, so thank you very much for that. Background noise can be really distracting, so please do leave the mics on mute until we get to the Q&A section. We're also, Kai and I and all the chippers working from home at the moment, so apologies in advance for any doorbells, kids crying, dogs barking that you hear in our backgrounds, particularly as Kai's talking. It is going to be our new norm, I think. Secondly, feel free to turn on your webcam if you're happy to do so. We're really hoping to make this feel as an in-person event as possible, but I know you're not trained yet, so maybe you won't want to do that until you've been through the session. But it is nice to see faces beyond just my family's faces. So thank you to those brave souls who have their cameras on. Lastly, if you do have questions throughout this session, there is a chat pane if you've come in in the Zoom app or online. So please address that to me or to everyone, because I'm going to help Kai so he doesn't have to concentrate on those too hard as he walks through his presentation. But Kai, I'm going to interrupt you, I guess, in various sections so those questions get answered as we go through. We'll also have time at the end if you want to stick around, and Kai can stay on the line and answer any questions. That's enough from me. I'd like to introduce you to Kai. He is Blue Chip's, well, let me just say, he's actually a former broadcast journalist. He's worked in the likes of the ABC, Sky News Australia, SBS and the AFR. He's also an experienced media trainer. He runs training sessions for spokespeople who want to put their most compelling foot forward in the media. He knows what news desks and editors are looking for, but most relevantly for today's session, he's going to help us come across really well on camera. You might have also noticed that the news is relying on setups like this essentially for their live crosses. They're not sending out news crews. So for those of you that are interested in broadcast and if we can find broadcast opportunities that work for you, this will be a really good setup for you to come across and be very usable for the news desks. All right, that's enough from me. So I'm going to hand over to Kai to run through his presentation. Thanks, Kai.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Now, look, I know for many of you, I think most of you are now working from home. And initially you might think, well, is this really so important, how you come across or how you present? And look, to be fair, in the early days, this is more likely, what you are probably dealing with. Video conference bingo. Can everyone see this on their screen?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good, because I'm pretty sure that's actually one of the bingo items there, right? So you can just see, can everybody see my screen, right? So, in the early going, we're all just kind of faffing around with video conferencing. And to be honest, for your day-to-day team meetings, that's probably, a lot of these rules that I'm about to go through probably aren't crucial. But there will come a time when, for example, you will have to present for example, do present in media interviews, and also where you might have to present webinars as well. I'm sure many of you are in the events area and you're suddenly realizing, gee, we haven't really prepared webinars before, and how can we put our best foot forward? So that's what today is dealing with, not necessarily your everyday video conferencing that you'll be doing with your teams via Zoom, but some of the more professional aspects. So that's why I've done my hair today and I'm wearing a collared shirt. It's important to project the image that you would if you're doing this face-to-face. So I'm presenting this in 10 easy steps, and I will have a few little visual aids along the way. And of course, we will make a summary of this available to everyone afterwards. As Dan said, you can type your questions or even just unmute yourself. And I think Danielle's going to marshal, the Q&A. So let's get straight into it, everyone. So basically, rule number one is don't blow out your background. So what do I mean by that? So as some of you may have noticed, if you try to take a photo with, say, an iPhone, you'll find that many people often go, oh, gee, there's a great view behind me. I'm really going to, go for that beautiful daylight view in this high-rise building that I'm in. And unfortunately, what they end up with is something like, whoops, hang on a second, is something like this. Okay, can you guys see that photo? So the photo on the left, you'll see is what happens when your lighting behind you is brighter than the one on your face. So basically, you should always try to do what has happened on the right. And what's happened is that that gentleman has pivoted his position so that his face is now has the brightest light source. And I can tell you right now from experience, daylight is extremely bright in the eyes of TV cameras. And so if you have a window behind you, you're going to make for a fairly annoying and irritating video presentation to your audience. Try to not let your background behind you be more brightly lit than your face. And I'm going to tell you how to get around that in a moment. However, I also wanted to take you through another problem, and that is what happens if your face is not lit evenly. So that's tip number 2. Don't light your face unevenly. Right? If you ever wonder why TV news studios always seem to have so many cameras involved, if you've ever been in a studio, you're wondering why they have to shine so many on you, it's to avoid situations like this. You can see with this gentleman that he's heavily illuminated from the lights to the top right of his head, and it doesn't look good. Okay, so those are 2 major lighting issues. So how do you fix it? Okay, so here are some of the basic tips that I would give you guys on that. Rule number 1 is, or option number 1 is the one that I'm currently practicing right now. Try to face a window. If it's daylight hours, try to find a daylight window, because while I can tell you a little bit about how to arrange lights to brighten up your face, daylight just does it so much more easily and simpler. Okay, daylight is very even and it's soft and it's flattering. So I would strongly encourage you just simply pick up your laptop and yourself and just simply move into a position where the sun comes right down onto your face. Okay, it doesn't need to be direct sunlight, it just needs to be daylight. Of course, I understand this isn't going to be possible for everyone. You might be in a study, could be at night, for example. And so in that case, I would recommend that you do look to use desk lights. So you'll all have some kind of desk lamps available, and you would basically just simply point them at your face. Not at your eyes, because looking at people squinting is also not appealing for your audience, but actually aimed at your actual face. So you can have it just off to the side is what I would recommend. So it just sort of shines down on your cheek, sort of coming in, say, this way. And of course, you can use the screen, your own screen, to preview how that looks. If the light is too harsh, you can always you can always tape a piece of tissue paper or muslin cloth or something like that over the top of it to soften it. And if you really want to improve things, and so by the way, and if you do that, then you will hopefully end up with, I'll just show you the contrast, what a difference it can make. So rather than the uneven tone you're seeing on the left there, you'll at least get a much more even tone. So that gentleman there is using artificial light on his face, and you can see it works much better. He's much more evenly lit. Okay. Now, besides that, just one moment, we also have the option of using an look, if you're planning on doing this a lot, and I think the reality is that we are all going to be using video conferencing a lot more, it might even be worth investing in a little light like this. You can see to the right of the screen. Those little lights, sometimes they can be quite cheap. They are designed to produce a soft, relatively even light. And you can just, as you can see, just prop it up next to your monitor. And that can really solve a lot of your issues if you don't have access to daylight, or even if you do, and one day find yourself in a situation where you can't use it. Okay, so that's some of the basics of lighting. Okay, I would also suggest that this is something interesting I noticed. My own monitor, at home, I have a giant 34-inch monitor, not the one I'm using at the moment, but I found that can actually illuminate my face quite well, right? And so if you notice that your monitor screen is lighting up your face and it's not causing any issues, then great, use it. However, I've got one big caveat, okay? And some of you would have experienced this before, and that is the phenomenon of becoming the blue man, which brings us to tip number 3, which is don't be the blue man. So you can see what's happened here. The blue light of the computer. So even though our eyes don't perceive blue light, computer light, you've probably heard it a lot, mobile devices, they all emit on the spectrum what's called blue light. Now, normally a good camera, whether it's your laptop camera or if you're using a mobile device, will adjust for this, right? However, a lot of them will average the light that's in the room. So you can see around him, he's got some normal tungsten warmish ceiling lights behind him. And what the camera does is it tries to average the light that's there, which means that the background looks okay, but he looks blue. And by the way, you can also see the reflection of his screen in his glasses, which might look great in, for example, when you're watching a current affairs and they're doing those spooky episodes about people who are misusing, cyber intelligence. However, it's not so good, when you're trying to speak to clients. So what's the solution there? Look, it's the same. Basically, you should try to a base daylight, which will overpower the blueness of your screen, or use stronger lights instead. You can also try moving slightly further away too. So look, I've just rattled off 3 of our tips there. I'm not sure if there's any questions at the moment, Dan.
Yeah, there is. What is the special light called? Do you have a name or a brand name to look for that? Yeah, absolutely. So look, honestly, that's the kind of thing that people can just whip up off YouTube, eBay or even Amazon. You can get it quite cheaply, but those, I would basically just look for portable studio lights or LED studio lights. And what you'll find is once you go to, say, an Amazon, you'll see that there's a lot of people, a lot of smaller businesses, for example, that are buying these lights relatively cheaply. I would not bother investing in any kind of expensive brand names. And to be honest, most of the big brand names like Sony either don't produce these kind of lights or they produce them at about 6 times more than you probably need. That said, you can always buy one of these. Look, I would guess that the costs might be around $80 to $120. And, depending on the size that you get. And what those lights will allow you to do, so as I mentioned, look for LED studio lights on Google, if that's your first stop. Some of them will actually allow you to adjust the temperature of the light, which basically means how yellow or blue or white it is very easily. So if you have a little rehearsal like that before any kind of professional presentation, then you'll be fine. Any other questions? Okay, great. So excellent. So look, let's move on to tip number 4, and that is something called headroom. Don't know if anyone remembers the Max Headroom character from a long time ago, but there's a reason that name came up, and that's because of something that everyone in media is taught, that all of us that have been TV presenters have been taught, and that is to minimize headroom. So what is headroom? Let me show you here from the
spoof account of Jonathan Pye. This is often what happens when people video a stream for the first time. A huge gap, big gap above his head, right? And people do this because they think, hey, look, people's eyes are going to be drawn to the middle of the screen, right? And what you'll notice is that if most of you look at, say, holiday photos and so forth, people tend to want to put things right in the middle of the screen. But that is actually not how our eyes are naturally, drawn. And let me show you what is slightly, whoops, 1 second here. Let me just show you a better example of headroom. And 1 second, here we go. Whoops, okay, I think I've shared my whole screen there. There's another little tip for you. Always be careful what you share on your screen. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to show, there we go. So if you have a look at this photo, that's a screenshot of Lee Sales and obviously interviewing Scott Morrison. You can see there is very little room above their heads. So what my recommendation is always try to have the top of your head touching the top of the screen, as mine is right now. So if I'll just jump back there. It's a relatively simple thing, but it could, like in normal broadcast situations, but it can actually be quite complicated when you're actually trying to do it from home. So as you can see, very little space above my head, okay? I don't want to point to any bad examples who are currently watching the call because, look, obviously you guys are just here to learn, so that's totally okay. But look, this is something that you will probably need to adjust by tilting your laptop screen. So often what will happen is that we will have our laptops down on the table. This laptop is now at table height, and this is what happens if I want to get my face in the screen. And that is because the camera normally is at your stomach or your chest height, right? You don't want that, and so people tilt it upwards, and that's usually where this problem comes from. It can also happen with tablets and mobile phones. I would not recommend, by the way, using mobile phones or tablets for professional presenting. Yes, in short, what you should try to do, so what I've done is I have put a shoebox on my desk. Just find anything that will allow you to elevate your laptop, and then you can actually then tilt the screen and you'll get this much more eye level kind of shot, okay? Okay, so that is a way of eliminating headroom, okay? It is also a way of eliminating that other problem, which is what I would call tip number 5, don't make your nostrils or ceiling the key feature of your presentation, okay? Arguably, it's the number one problem. I'm going to show you, I basically just showed you what can happen if it's pointing the wrong way. So another option you can use, by the way, if you're finding that, because this will require a lot of fiddling, is just change the distance. You'll see as I move away, there's more space above my head, okay? So you can play with the distance a little bit and can make a big difference to being able to get you positioned right, okay? So, by the way, any questions so far before I move on to tip number 6?
Anybody got any questions? There's nothing in chat so far. Thanks, Kai.
Okay. Okay. Now, occasionally you will be required to use a mobile phone. Okay. And that brings a few issues, but the number one or the main issue that I wanted to bring up there is don't use what we would call portrait orientation on your phone. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Let me just show you. Whoops, 1 second. Okay, and this is what many of you who have a tablet would be using, and that is there. Okay, so have a look at this gentleman here. Okay, what your audience will get are these big black bars on the side. This, by the way, of course, is what many of you would be used to seeing, what many of you, when somebody, for example, a news network gets hold of some mobile phone footage from someone, right? They'll end up with those big black bars. So always try to, if you have to use a mobile phone, put it in what's called landscape orientation, okay? So in other words, have it so that it is horizontal. That, by the way, will require, given the placement of the camera is going to change, again, will probably require you maybe to put a couple of shoe boxes up on your desk. By the way, when using props like shoe boxes or books, make sure that they are stable. Okay, you might think, oh, this is the perfect positioning, and then you might just bump the desk and the whole thing comes down. Nothing more embarrassing, I would say, during a client presentation, other than some of the other things that I'm about to show you. But yes, try to use, of course, the other way of getting around that is by always trying to use a laptop. Not only will it give you access to everything that you need, most laptop cameras have improved enough that while they might not be as good as a mobile phone camera, they're still going to do a pretty good job. Okay, so yes, another one. Now, what you'll notice is that every now and then when I've been looking down at my notes and so forth, it's probably been a little bit disconcerting for you, right? So tip number 7 is don't look at your screen only, right? Try to look at the camera itself from time to time. So for most of you with a laptop, that is going to be just above your monitor screen. And what you should do, even though when you talk to people, so for example, I'm looking on the screen right now, and I'm looking down at people at the bottom of my screen, and you can see my eyes are being drawn downwards. Now, if I was presenting, that would be quite disconcerting. And so what is much better is if rather than just constantly looking down at your notes that might be on the screen, try to look, at least when you're speaking, at that little camera lens itself, okay? Just glance at it from time to time, and eventually you'll become used to looking at it. So I'm doing that right now, and I'm assuming that you guys will find this a much more engaging experience for the same reason that when you're talking to someone in real life, if they were staring at your throat for the entire conversation, you'd probably find that somewhat disconcerting. So yes, that little camera lens on your phone or on your device, try to imagine that's the person you're talking to. And by the way, this is one of the great skills of a television journalist or anyone who has to present on TV. It's pretending that that little lens is the face of somebody they know, right? So if you can do that, you will talk and engage with your audience out there in a much more genuine and convincing way. If you can convince yourself that's a person you're talking to, looking right down that camera. Okay, so that's tip number 7. Now, in terms of backgrounds, so I've got some great examples here. First of all, I'm sure that many people, I won't unfortunately be able to play the whole clip for us, just in the interest of preserving your precious time. I'm sure many people remember this fantastic viral moment where BBC, I think it was Robert Kelly, he's an expert on North Korea. He was presenting with the BBC, as you can see there, and some of you may remember his little girl waltzed into the room, pranced into the room, shortly followed by his, I believe it was his 8-month-old daughter came waddling in, and then, as you can see, the frantic mother came charging in to pull them out of there. Don't let that be you. Not because, look, it was great for becoming viral, but that's probably not what you want to happen, and that's not the image that you want to project to your team. Another great example of why a background is important. Don't know if anyone remembers this incident, but yes, I believe that's Martin Lakos, who was at Macquarie Bank at the time, did a lot of crosses. They had their they have their desks, their office in the background, like many people who present. And one of his colleagues just happened to get an email, or claimed to have just gotten an email and didn't realize what he was opening, that showed photos of Miranda Kerr in, shall we say, non-business attire. So you do need to be very careful of what is in your backgrounds. And so before you go on, always make sure that you preview your image and what's in screen, okay? Make sure that if you adjust your position, right? If you change where you are, if you say, oh, sorry guys, it's not very bright, and you readjust your position, that you check your background again. Needless to say, with so many of us working from home, and potentially with children, very shortly to be no longer attending school and running around the house, you should try to control your environment as much as possible. Close the door, obviously being one of the obvious ones that I think Robert Kelly he'll never make that mistake again. Look, pets, anything like that. I'm probably not going to come across as very positive here, but I sent my wife and our 7-week-old son out for a walk this morning. Don't worry, they'll be completely safe, but I just knew that if I was going to be presenting for this amount of time, your audience is not going to forgive the fact that you have noisy family around. I mean, their hearts will forgive you, but it'll be very grating for them if you're constantly being interrupted by noise. Dan, any questions at all at the moment?
No, and I would just, we've been playing around with virtual backgrounds. I don't know if we're not Zoom experts at all, but I don't know if anybody can see Gigi's little tile, for instance. Thank you for waving, Gigi, but you can also see as she waves that it glitches as well. So it's really good if you don't necessarily want people seeing into your home, so you can choose a virtual background. You can upload any JPEG you like and even little looping video to do that. But be aware it's not going to be something like what Spielberg would produce. And I suspect that if it was going for broadcast, they'd be horrified to have a virtual background like that one. Zoom lets you do that sort of virtual background, and I think Teams, which I've also used, lets you blur your background, which can then just soften the piles of laundry or whatnot that's going on at home at the moment.
Great, yeah, no, that's right. Thanks, Dan. Okay, so look, we're moving quite quickly now. So we're on to tip number 9 of our 10, and that is sound. So sound matters a lot. It's often been said in video that people may forgive some poor image quality, but they have extremely short tolerance for bad audio. So there's a few obvious things to address there. Kitchens often have tiles, so they are not ideal places to be doing your video conferencing, and so because they can be very echoey. In fact, many offices these days have huge amounts of glass in them, and glass reflects sound. So where possible, I would strongly recommend, because chances are for your home, you've never even had to think about this before. I would strongly recommend finding a room, if you can, that is carpeted, because carpet absorbs a huge amount of outside external noise and stops echoing, and also curtains, partly because curtains absorb sound, say better than blinds, but also because they'll obviously cover the window, which bounces sound. So if you can then minimize the amount of noise there, then you'll be doing pretty well, especially if you can only use the microphone that's currently on your laptop. So that then brings me to the next solution to bad sound, and that is, rather than using the microphone on your laptop, which is usually perched somewhere below the keyboard, and so it's not really designed and it's usually not the most sophisticated microphone either. Quite simply because laptop manufacturers often think people won't use them very often. The one on your phone tends to be a lot better. You'll notice often it's very good at filtering out people's outside noise. But as I mentioned, I would recommend not using your phone or a tablet to do video conferencing, right? And partly because they're just so hard to maneuver into a position. You can buy little phone tripods, but they tend to be very fiddly, and you tend to still need a lot of shoe boxes to get it up to the right level. The other thing you need to buy then, if you don't have it already, is a wireless headphone, a wireless earpiece like this. Okay. Now, some of you may remember a few years ago, Bluetooth headsets were all the rage with Wall Street. They've gone out of fashion very, very quickly. But if you do have access to them, so they're things like, say, the Plantronics Voyager, that was probably the most popular one, then they can make a big difference. So why am I recommending those in particular? And well, put simply, it's because they look a lot better than these kind of headphones here. Okay, so as you can see, many people just chuck on the ones that came free with their iPhone. Okay, and you can see, like, it's quite distracting, these wires hanging down. It's just not a professional look, because if you were doing a face-to-face meeting right, you would not have a pair of headphones on. And it's just disconcerting for people to see. You know, so as I said, you know, you get yourself a little headpiece like this. It's usually part of, say, if you have Apple AirPods, if you have iPhone AirPods, these are called the Jabra 65T Elites. You can get them from JB Hi-Fi and pretty much anywhere. They're very popular as well and a lot cheaper than the AirPods. And most of those that you put in both ears will allow you to just use the right-hand one. Use the right-hand one because that's the one that usually has the microphone in it. And these microphones are designed to minimize outside noise. They're not perfect, but they'll do probably a better job than your laptop. You'll get much better sound quality and it won't be nearly as distracting. So sometimes, for example, you know, if you're used to wearing those big cans on your head, like those Bose noise cancelling headphones, you know, again, it's not a great look if you're doing a professional presentation. Fine, perhaps for your day-to-day encounters with your colleagues, but not so much if you're presenting to a wider audience or customers. Okay. Any other questions at that point, Dan?
No, but Christina noticed on the news last night somebody blurred their background, so the tip is out there.
Yeah, look, you know, look, it probably goes without saying that, you know, if it works passably, and look, I would say the one behind Gigi's okay. It's probably a little bit exotic. It's moving a little bit more towards over stylized rather than realistic, but I'm not sure if that's because Gigi, you might have some lights on that are pointing at your background somehow. I don't know, but it's obviously a slightly stylized background. You know, but I will say this, having just even a little bit of color in your backgrounds can look better than just a white wall. Okay, white walls, basically they make you look like you're in a sanitarium. You know, they are very impersonal. They're a little bit plain. I know that's what I've got behind me, but at least there's a little bit of texture from these doors here. So don't think that completely plain white is always your best option. Okay, so mainly I've talked about everything that involves basically what you call videography or cinematography, right? Lighting and sound. The final ingredient and our final tip here is how you come across. And to this is tip number 10. Don't wear the wrong outfits. Okay, so what you'll find with, you know, again, if you haven't done video before and suddenly you're now looking at, hey, I might not be presenting to the ABC anytime soon in an interview, but gee, we've got those webinars coming up. What should I wear? So one of the things you need to be aware of is this issue called strobing. Okay, I'm just going to show you an example of a shirt that is strobing. That shirt, by the way, it is a perfectly normal, thinly striped shirt. So in other words, the stripes are very narrow together. That, unfortunately, cameras cannot handle it, okay? Or many cameras. And I don't care whether they're the $200,000 cameras that Channel 7 has, or whether they're maybe even your own mobile phone, because of basically it's related to the refresh rate of these cameras, is that you will look completely psychedelic in a shirt like that. So try to avoid tight, busy patterns like that, okay? Your best bet is basically block colors. Okay, you know, if you're going to wear a tie, don't go for the ties with lots of very fine stripes. Go for those with either big blocky stripes or obviously that, you know, where the tie just might be one solid color in itself. A few other things, if you wear wristwear, like bangles, perhaps you know, a metal watch band or something like that, because you're sitting at a desk, something we've often noticed in newsrooms when we have done Skype crosses with people, is that they'll bang them on the desk and they don't notice it. And when you're talking to colleagues, no one notices these things, but your audience is going to hear this. And because it's repetitive, anything repetitive, for example, whether it's a facial tick or a wrap of the thing, it starts to distract people because subconsciously they start listening out for these things. So just check your wristwear and just the surface in front of you to make sure that you're not banging things on that. Ladies, just be careful with earrings. Studs are better than dangling earrings because when your head moves, they'll move, and it's distracting in a way that perhaps in real life doesn't really matter. But on camera, it's amplified and it becomes much more noticeable. Okay, so there's a few tips, and look, the other stuff goes without saying. When you've gotten used to working from home very casually, just make sure you do your hair as well. Crazy hair or messy hair is, how do I put this? Cameras pick up every little thing about them, right? Which is why usually, so for example, when men go on television, they spray, say on HD news, they will spray their hair to within an inch of its life to stop little tufts and so forth from coming up. These things sound small, but it can even look a little bit comical, and it's probably not what you're going for, and not something you want distracting your audience. Dan, any other questions at this point, now that I've hit point number 10?
I was just interested, Kai, around the colour of what you're wearing and your background. Any comments about that?
Yeah, so I would generally try to avoid black. Black absorbs light, it destroys shape. So it can look just a little bit strange on camera. You'll see, for example, when most television presenters and reporters are on there, they don't wear black. Okay. In fact, usually they don't wear white unless it's broken up by something else, because those colors just look too flat. So I'm wearing, for example, a light blue shirt here, which is probably fine. And I'm pretty sure, for example, a lot of men and probably most women would have that in their wardrobes.
And anything about contrast? So, should you not be the same color as your wall?
Yeah, look, look, I haven't explored too much some of these new features that allow you to change your background. I'm assuming that they're not using a green screen effect. Look, obviously if you can have a little bit of contrast, then visually it's more pleasing. But I know it's going to be challenging for many people. Don't expect you to paint or change rooms necessarily. What I would say is don't go for too vivid a color, because then it will become distracting and maybe even come across as a little unprofessional, right? True, they might be eye-catching on camera, but you probably don't want to look like you're auditioning for the Wiggles either. So yeah, a little bit of contrast is good, but you don't have to do too much to make that happen.
Thank you so much, Kai. Is there any last questions that people have? Feel free to actually just unmute yourself if that's easier at the moment. I know if you're on a mobile, it can be, you can't use the chat. So does anybody have any last questions that they don't have of Kai? Lots of shaking heads. Okay, thank you very much. All right, well, that's all we've got questions for, all the questions done then. If you think of anything else, obviously reach out to your usual blue chip people. We have recorded this session, and so we will make it available later this week. We've also got a bit of a guide which captures all Kai's tips, which we'll be sending out later this week as well. So thank you for coming and attending our first Lunch and Learn, and for being a blue chipper for the purposes of today. Hope you got something out of it, and I hope business goes well for everybody. Stay safe. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.